All right, we're back for another birth story. This is for women who want to have a supernatural childbirth. This is a mama who is going to, one, inspire you, keep it real with you. She had a home birth. She is a mama who believes in Jesus and allowed him to be present in her birth. Hopefully y'all can hear me now. It looks like everybody can hear now. The last video volume sound wasn't working, so I think we're good now. But we're gonna jump into the story like right away because I want to make sure that y'all have as much time to answer or ask questions as possible. So we're going to this is going to be the story to inspire you.
Hi, girl.
I think we're hey girl.
You look great.
You look great. Oh, thanks. Appreciate you. This is the sun hitting me at the right angle right now. Well, I'm excited. For those of you who do not know Wanda, she's amazing. She's an amazing mama. She's an amazing creator. She is an amazing wife, all the things. But I want to just jump into the story, so we have as much time to talk about it as possible. But tell everybody who you are. For those of you who don't know who she is, this story is the one that constantly gives me chills to think about and to just have watched the journey, because we spent so much time together, through your pregnancy and then of course on the day of your birth. So give them some context, background, who you are and how we ended up crossing paths.
First of all,
in terms of you choosing
inviting me on
VBAC.
here to share my story. I'm excited to be here. It's crazy, it's surreal, because I remember watching these stories when I was pregnant and I was like, ooh, I pray that everything works out. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Wanda. I'm a twin mom, and I did IVF actually to conceive all of my kids. I have Koa right here. And so the first pregnancy was pretty traumatic for me. I had a C-section, and the boys came at 35 weeks. One of the twins ended up in the NICU. And so also just, I guess, going through infertility, my general trust in my body was not there. I didn't really believe that my body was capable of conception or really carrying to term, and also that I could push a baby out. But one of my friends actually suggested or told me that I should look into a home birth. Well, Lo, my husband's name is Lo, by the way. I may mention him a lot. He thought that we should do it, but he told me to pray about it. And then pretty much God just sent through confirmation through one of my friends. So I gave my midwife a call and I gave Chanel a call, and both of them really helped me to believe that it was possible. And then there started the journey to trying to have my baby at home.
Yes. So I remember our first conversation, and I was sitting in my driveway actually, and I was in the car, and I was we're talking through the reason for your C-section and all the things, and you're yeah, I'm just oh gosh, we're I'm just scared and I don't know if it's possible. And I was look, you can do this. And for a lot of us, even myself included, for those of you who have had C-sections before and you're going for a VBAC, I almost feel there's an even greater hill to climb when you're preparing, because you've been through the thing that you said you never wanted to do, or some women's greatest fears is a C-section. You've been there and you know what it's like, and you're I don't want to go back there again. And so I was so excited after you kind of prayed about it, talked to Lo about it, and then you're we move forward, we switch providers, we're gonna do this thing. And also I also want to call out here too, for those of you who, and I talked to a mama earlier about this, is just the commute. I know that's something that seems really surface level, but you were commuting a good bit for your appointments to have made this switch. And so it wasn't even a convenient switch for you. What made you do that? What made you kind of take the leap, knowing I'm going to be driving over an hour to get to my appointments? which are going to increase the
I
closer I get
remember,
to my birth, like what
and
made
that was a
you
good part that
move
I
in
actually
that
forgot,
direction?
but when I was actually going to like a OBGYN initially, and it was actually like 5 minutes from my house, maybe 5 to 10. But I remember he was telling me, like, he literally gave me like, there's a 1% chance that you could DIE from doing a VBAC. So we'll try. And I remember just feeling so much doubt. And so when I ended up finally talking to you and then talking to Amy, I just had so much peace that it was like, I don't care how far I have to drive because this is what I want. And I feel like once I made up my mind that that's what I wanted to do, it didn't matter how far I was going to drive. Because like, you can't replace a good provider. You know, you can't replace that.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so real. And for those of you who are like, there's this provider, this pediatrician, or like whatever, and it's a kind of a long drive. Like, I get it, driving sucks. Like, I hate sitting in traffic, it's the worst. But every provider, for the most part, that I see is a commute for me. And I wouldn't change it for the world, because convenience is not always going to be what is actually like going to help your confidence. You cannot, yeah, like you said, you cannot replace a good provider. Okay, so we decided we're gonna have this VBAC. You were like, hospital to just jumped all the way to home birth. We're like, okay, we're gonna have a home birth. We're gonna start prepping for this home birth. What did you do to start preparing? Because there was birth trauma there, and so like talk to us about what trauma or fears you were carrying around, and how did you work through
Yeah,
getting
that's a
yourself
good
to the place
question.
where you
I was
felt confident to
really,
have this home
I
birth?
mean, I was fearful, you know. I called every time me and Chanel talked, it was like another fear, honestly. So I think, honestly, I don't think I would have done it without you. So shout out to you. Um, but I remember I just kept writing them down on my notes and then just like vocalizing them. And every time I vocalized them, you would present me with like facts and like, here's what could happen instead. Here's the chance of this happening. And like, it just, I feel like a lot of times we can be like super fearful or have fears, and we just kind of like keep them to ourselves, and we keep them within ourselves. So then they grow, because it's like, you know, I have this big fear that's telling me this is going to happen, but you're not like vocalizing it to hear how like unrealistic you're sounding. And even though like I feel like you validated them, but you also like would give me facts.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really helped me. And then any other questions that I had that you couldn't answer, you're like, just ask, you know, talk to your midwife. So I feel like you were a good support in that. But another thing that was really, really good for me, because I don't know if anybody else on here is like an information person, but I'm an information person, and I will Google away. I'm like, oh, you said it's going to be fine, but what does Google say? And so getting off of Google helped me, but also the fact that you not only were like my doula, but like you had that class, which I told Chanel about this privately, honestly, because she knows I was here for her class, because that class had like all of the very real fears and like things that could happen, but it had like the chances, it had all of like just so much information that made me feel empowered to make decisions for myself. It was like, okay, here's the chance of this happening, but here's the chance of that happening. And it was like, I just felt empowered, and I felt like I can do this versus like, I can't do this. And you know, things are out of my control. So I think the number one thing for me with birth was that I didn't have control over my birth. I didn't make decisions for it the first time. I couldn't control, you know, like I didn't know that I could speak up for myself. I didn't know that I could say, hey, let's wait and see, or that I could ask someone else, or like get a second opinion on things the first time around. So that was something that I wanted to make sure never happened again. So just like having all the information, and then having support around me, and also like investing in more support. Because I remember like me saying, oh, I'm having pain, you know, and like there's certain things that you really couldn't address. So it was like, hey, you should start seeing a chiropractor. Hey, you should start going to a pelvic floor therapist. So I ended up just essentially getting a whole team of people around me to support the decision that I was making. And I feel like in my first pregnancy, I pretty much just went through it just like, oh, I can do this, and I don't need to know anything else. When the baby gets here, I'll know what to do. And I feel like that set me up for failure. So this time around, I invested in a team. I invested in knowledge. I advocated for myself. I was able to like feel really empowered in whatever decision I was making, so that even if it didn't work out, I would know like I did the best that I could. And I feel like that really helped me to like overcome all of the fears.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so real to me, because I think sometimes I'll talk to women and they'll be like, "I'm not afraid of anything. I'm just super excited." And I'm like, "Are you sure?" And I'm not here to ever like instill fear in anybody, right? Because we don't want you to walk around with fear, but like there's always something. And sometimes we just kind of push under the rug because it's like, "Oh, it's not a big deal. Like it's just that, one thing," but it's not like, maternal mortality. So it's like can't be that scary. But the reality is those things tend to come up and they can stop or stall labor if you're like in your head too much and you haven't freed yourself from whatever the fear is that you're carrying around. So I'm just so, because every time we did
Oh
talk,
yeah.
you'd be like, "Hey, I saw my friend, she posted this thing." And I'm like, "Okay, let's rewind. Let's rewind." She's like, "My friend had this experience, and like, what if that happens to me?" Um, and yes, for those of you watching, like, there's always a chance. There's a risk in every single decision that we make. There's a risk in getting in the car and driving to the store. But to know and to have control over how to follow up with that fear, if it were to come up and show up, that's where the power lies. And I feel like we'll jump into the story, but like, watching you go through that journey and that process is, to me, on my side and from my lens as the doula, is like, that is what made this whole moment and birth so transformative. Because it wasn't like, "Okay, I said I'm going to do this and we're going to do it, and I prayed about it and that's where I'm going to leave it." Yes, absolutely. Like, faith is a huge part of your story, but like, faith without works is dead. You had to still do the work. Like, you still had to do the things to help you know how to navigate what was put in front of you, and then also trust God in that process. Because like, there's like two things here. Also, for those of you who are watching, the course does close tomorrow. Enrollment closes tomorrow, so just like throwing that out there in case y'all don't stay to the end. Enrollment does close tomorrow. Be the Change is the discount code to enroll with special pricing.
Course, guys,
that being said, let's talk about where the I mean, again, y'all, I have not actually done it this way in a year, like just offered the course without working with my clients. It's for this reason, because for those of you who may not want to have a doula, may not have access to a doula, like, you still deserve to have the information to be empowered and to feel powerful and in control for whatever type of birth you're planning for. So that's the whole purpose of this. That's why we're sharing it the way that we are, and that's why it's available to you. So you have all the knowledge, you got all the stuff, you have a supportive birth team, you have all the providers, and now we're getting close to like
for me,
the big day.
I want to be realistic too.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Before I jump in. I'm sorry, everybody.
It's fine. My ring camera keeps going off on my
So one super important thing for me, I think, was the fact that, like, and what I hear from a lot of people too was like, can you hear me? Someone said my sound went out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's like lagging
one
a
thing
little
for
bit,
me
but I think
was,
you're okay.
You know, and I think a lot of people think about this is the price. Like, I was like, oh, like I'm spending what I spent maybe $6,000 on Amy, and then I had to add in a doula fee, and then I had to pay for a chiropractor, then I had to pay for a pelvic floor therapist, then I had to go pay for massage therapist, then I had to pay for this, then I had to pay for that. And that, I think that's a big barrier that a lot of people have. And for me, it was like, it was non-negotiable, because I was realistic with myself, and I knew, I was like, bro, I need a support system, I need a team, I need people that know. And so if I have to push back my budget in other areas, you know, then that's fine. Because even for like my OBGYN, that was going to be only $600 to give birth. Okay. But for me, it was like, either I'm going to feel like I'm going to, not have my voice heard, and then I'm going to have a repeat C-section, or I'm going to invest in myself. And I think like for a lot of people, like when you have a baby, you think about, I'm going to go have a baby shower. I'm going to buy the baby the best crib, and I'm going to buy the baby this, and I'm going to pay for maternity pictures, and and so you really have the money for the baby, but like you invest it in other areas. And for me, I feel like that's what I hear from a lot of people. And I try to be like, y'all, like, you just have to make that investment. If you don't have a baby shower, wedding, because that's how much they cost nowadays. And I'm all for it. I'm here for a party. But if I had to weigh the two,
Listen.
I would have definitely invested in that. So if anybody's like on the fence for that, that's my thing. And I feel like I'm just speaking from like my experience. So yeah, that's what I want to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. And yeah, it's real. I mean, we spent a lot of money on our first baby shower, and it's just a party for everybody else, honestly. It's like you're paying for people to come bring you things that they would have brought you anyways. And again, I'm all for the celebration. You should feel showered and loved. But yeah, to your point, like we interviewed a doula the first time around, and we're like, oh, I think we got it. My husband's enough. Like he's gonna just support me. Which I do believe that if your partner is prepared enough, they can actually support you in the way that you need them to support you. But my husband was not prepared. And so we spent more money on our baby shower than we would have invested to just have this doula and save us a lot of trauma. So to Wanda's point, prioritize your finances, and also like, if you can't afford it, there's these places out on the internet that are registries. One of them is called Be Her Village. And you can actually, instead of putting like things on there, you can put services. So like if you have a course or a doula, like people can give towards that instead of like buying you sheets or onesies or things like that. So look that up. That being said, let's jump into the actual story. So we getting close. There was some like, I think I'm in labor, but I'm not. And there was like a lot of like mental battles, I would say, towards the end. So like walk us through that experience before the big day even got there.
It was
and
wild.
What was going on for you, like, as you were preparing?
Labor. Starting at it was like 35 weeks. I remember sending you a message saying, I'm having contractions. And truthfully, I was having like contractions, honestly. Like, so there was a lot of times where I was like, I'm going into labor. And for me, because I had given birth at 35 weeks, I was like, I'm going into labor. I remember going to my midwife and telling her, like, hopefully I can make it to 36 so I can still do it with you and all these things. So like, I had a lot of like on and off, like my body maybe trying to prepare itself. And so sometimes that got to me. And I think like I got into early labor. I was in early labor, but my water hadn't broke. And then I remember like Lo and I were like praying, and then my water broke. And so I was expecting to go into labor right then and there. And literally it was like 2 days later before I ever even got into labor. So for me, the mental battle was like, is this even going to happen? Is my body able to do this? Can my body do this? And also it was like a lot of like me thinking that I knew what my next steps would look like. And so I kept getting discouraged, and I really wasn't like just resting into the fact that like whatever was going to happen was going to happen, like I wanted it to be like the birth stories that I see on YouTube, basically.
And I feel like there's something to say about that, and just like wait, like in the waiting period, right? Like there you had your water broken, and I think you called me, and it was like 11 o'clock at night. You're like, my water broke. I was like, okay, you're having contractions? No, not really. I'm like, okay, well, like rest, then call me back, if anything changes. And then I woke up the next morning, and I'm like, oh my God, I didn't hear my phone. What? And like you didn't call. And I was like, okay, well, I guess there's no baby. And then the next day, and I don't remember that was a Friday actually. And then we went all through Saturday, and I think there wasn't anything happening. And then I remember Sunday rolling around, and a lot of women by this point would have been freaked out, like, oh my God, my water has broken. I have to go to the hospital. Like, what made you so at peace, if you will, even though I'm sure there was other emotions going on, but like, what made you be able to just kind of sit in that and not drive yourself insane, knowing like, okay, my water has broken.
Well,
There's no contractions yet,
obviously
and gotta
knowing
just wait
like
this thing
that
out.
the movies isn't reality. So it was crazy because up until that time, I remember thinking that like your water breaking means like showtime, you having the baby in the next 2 hours. Like that's what movies show me, right? And so for me, um, I always thought that when my water broke that I was automatically just gonna like go into labor and whatever. But I remember just like texting you and you just kind of like reassuring me that like it would happen when it happened. But we also had like a lot of things that I was doing. So when my water broke, I started like doing more curb walks. So just for everybody's knowledge, since 14 weeks on, I walked at least 30 minutes a day, at least 4 times a week. So towards the end, when I got really tired, I remember Chanel was like, Wanda, I know you're getting tired, but this is game time. Like, you've been walking, keep it going. Matter of fact, kick it up. And I remember just thinking, this lady is crazy. Because why would she say this when I'm literally out of breath? But I was out here in my neighborhood just going down the street. I would do curb walking to try to drop the baby into my pelvis. I did everything that I possibly could, mile circuit. And so for me, I was thinking maybe I'm not in labor because my baby's not dropped in the pelvis. So I just did a lot of like walking, did a lot of like activities to try and like get this baby out. And so for me, I just knew like if the baby's not here right now, then the baby's not really ready and like I'm good. And then I had all the information also from like my midwives that was like, hey, Wanda, like I remember one of my midwives, she was like, I actually went 2 weeks after my water broke and I was fine. They have to give you like certain information and you get to make that decision. So for me, again, the hospital wasn't my option. I was like, I'm not trying to go to the hospital. I don't want to go to the hospital. I've worked this entire time. I know the education. I believe in myself. I believe in my body. So like whatever else I can do, let me do that. So I was just walking and I was just moving my body and trying to like get my mindset to the right place. And I remember thinking that maybe the baby's out of position. I remember we were thinking that he was like asynclitic, which means like his head is like somewhere against the pelvis. You could explain that more. And so I went to this place called Kino. And I remember he was just like, he was actually like trying to see where the baby's position is. He's like a body work person. And he was like, wait, your baby's head he's engaged in your pelvis and all this stuff. And then that's when we realized that, well, I got to the bottom of the fact that I was just still fearful. I was still battling, like trying to control everything. I was still battling it because I would have contractions, but like when they would come, they would stop. And that I just feel like I was putting myself into fight or flight. And one thing I learned is that like when you're in fight or flight, you're not going to be able to give birth, because all your blood is in your hands and they're in your feet. Okay, so I'm over here on and off in fight or flight thinking, ooh, can I really do this? Ooh, can I really do this? Even though like this whole time I've been believing that I can do this, I'm just like, it's just honestly was a war with myself because I've always been the type of person to like think ahead. I'm trying to plan for the worst. I'm always thinking the other shoe is going to drop. Matter of fact, in my life, a lot of other shoes have dropped and a lot of bad things have happened. So for me, it was just wrestling with the idea that like I could make all these plans and this could be really happening. Oh my gosh, I'm about to meet my baby, but am I? And so it was just a mental game for me, honestly. And so everything was fine. The baby's in alignment. I'm fine. My pelvis is fine. Everything's fine. The only thing that wasn't fine was my mindset. And so I remember Chanel was like, hey, Wanda, like, I'm going to meet you at this, I'm going to meet you there, and then I'm going to follow you home. And so I think she knew that I was just, like, battling a lot mentally, but you tell me what you were thinking when you were like, let me follow this lady back to her house. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Can you still hear me? Okay. Because I turned my volume off. Okay. So, yes. So I remember, because I knew like you were in your head when we talked, and I could imagine like, okay, I've had signs that my water has broken and I still don't have a baby. Like the contractions are sporadic, and a lot of times, like when you do have inconsistency in your contraction pattern, it is because baby's in a funky position sometimes. But once we confirmed that that wasn't the case, I just remember, like, for a lot of my clients, when I see them in this place, a lot of times we just need to let out like a big cry. Like, you need to be relieved that, like, okay, I'm okay. And then you're just usually holding something in so deep that you don't want to even accept. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I need her to dig deep and get that out. Otherwise, it's going to be a while before we have a baby. And so I was like, I'm going to follow you home and we're just going to chill. Now, normally, I wouldn't go to a client's house until they're in active labor, because labor can take a long time. And Wanda and I got very close during her labor because I basically spent the night. I did spend the night. And I was like, okay, I just want you to like relax and rest and like talk to me about what's going on. And so because there were so many other like competing things, I could tell that your head was just like in mom mode. It wasn't in like pregnant mode. It was like mom mode, because the boys were still awake. It was the middle of the day. You had these appointments, you have these signs, but it's not. And then Lo had his situation. Like, it was just a lot that you were carrying. And we were like, okay, if your husband isn't there at this moment because he had to go somewhere, you have your boys, like, you're not laboring by yourself. At the end of the day, like, if I have to be Lo and Chanel, then I'm gonna be Lo and Chanel for you, because like that's what needs to happen. So from my lens, it was like, I just needed you to feel peace that you did not have to carry it all by yourself, which is the role of a support person or a doula. Like, our job is to provide that level of support for you physically, mentally, and emotionally. And I could tell emotionally you were like tangled up. And mentally you were tangled up, and physically you had done everything that you needed to do. There was nothing that no stone left unturned. So I was like, I just need her to know that. So we're going to just be present, and there's nothing that we need to do. We just need to be present. We need to rest, and we need to like release. And so we went to the house, and I think we had like ordered food, or you had maybe ordered some food, and Lo came back, and then we were just kind of waiting. We're just kind of like letting things happen and trying to sleep and rest. And then I'll let you pick up the story from there, because I think one of the midwives came over and checked out baby heart rate and everything like that.
I forgot about a lot of that.
And then I'll let you pick it up from your perspective, and then I'll try. Okay, so so I think like contractions were happening, but they were very mild. You were managing them super well. Brittany came to the house to check on you, check on baby, and things were starting to pick up. And it was almost like every person that came to the house like helped you labor better, because every person that came to the house, it was almost like validation that like, oh, we're moving in the right direction. And then when Brittany was like, okay, I'm gonna leave and I'm gonna come back, you're like, why are you leaving? What? Why? And so I think that it was a mental battle of like really trusting yourself the way that like you had prepared to do.
Yeah, so then I remember that.
So that's where I'll leave it, unless you pick
Chanel's
up from there.
still here, but she's like, get some rest. And for me, I'm like, I can't get rest in a time like this. I mean, I can hardly rest as is. So now I'm in labor, I'm gonna go rest. And so it was just a battle for me to rest, because I'm like still having contractions. And every time that I would like just relax, the contractions would get stronger. And that's what I was like, wait, no. Like, so I just couldn't sleep through them. I don't know why. It just was like, I wasn't eased into it. I wasn't easing into it. So I remember that. And then maybe at the nighttime, I got like further into labor. And I remember like Lo, he kept like doing comfort measures. Chanel was doing comfort measures. We were doing all types of comfort measures. And then I remember going into the shower. And when I was in the shower, I felt like I was making a lot of progress. Like I was actually moving into active labor. But in my mind, all I'm remembering is one, like I definitely didn't remember that. I didn't realize that point, but that was a good point, because for my midwives to come back, they needed me in active labor. So I had to be like in active labor. So when I was in the bath, I was like, for sure, or in the shower, I was like, for sure, I know I'm in active labor. Why is she not calling the midwives? So I'm looking back. So I'm like, wait, guys, like this is just Like, okay, where's Amy? Where's Brittany? Like, what's happening, you know? And so I just felt, I guess I started feeling defeated because I was just like, nothing's happening. Even though stuff was happening, I just felt like, I felt like, you know, no, nothing's happening, because if that's the case, they're going to be there. Then in my mind, I was also thinking about Carmen getting there, like the photography. I was like, she's going to miss this whole birth, and I paid her all this money, and then the boys are going to wake up in the next 2 hours. And then, so like, I was not really like solid mentally. Mentally, I was just thinking about everything else. And then I was having contractions. And so Chanel kept saying, it doesn't seem like, are you meant, I'm there, I'm doing everything that I can, Chanel. What do you mean? Like, I'm getting mad at Chanel at this point. So it's like 5 a.m. and I think you went to go nap, Lo went to go nap. I took a quick nap, and then my contractions picked up. But then when everybody woke up again, they like calmed down. And so I remember just going outside. I remember it being rainy. And I was just like, pretty much I was just fed up. I was like, man, I just can't do this. Like, I felt like I was so mean to you. I was like, she's literally going to hate me now. And we were out there, and she was just like, I just think you're in your head, and I think you have to really find your place with God. And like, you know, you had some progress in the shower, and like, you just have to really release. She's like, all my clients, like, whenever they get to this point, it's like you either hold on or you just have to completely surrender. And I just don't think that you've gotten to that point of like complete surrender. And I looked at her and I was like, girl, like, I don't know how much more I can surrender. Like, I'm just tired of trying to work for this. I'm just like, at that point, I was just fed up. I'm like, I don't need another, like, in my mind, I was like, this is just another gimmick. Like, what else is there? And I'm just like really raw, and, you know, I'm just being honest, because I want everybody to know, if you're thinking about doing like a home birth, like, it's not easy. It's a mental battle. Like, Chanel made a post about like how it's 90% mental and 10% about the pain. I wholeheartedly stand by that, because if you're mentally solid, man, like, it doesn't matter what your body's feeling. So mentally, I felt like I couldn't do it. Mentally, I felt like this is like, I'm done. Enough is enough. Like, it didn't happen when I want it to happen. It's not happening in the way that I want it to happen. And so I feel like the rest of my time, I really just battled that on and off, you know? Yeah. So anytime my labor was stalled, it was based on my mindset.
Yeah. And what do you feel like? So once you went outside, and I was like, I just want you to talk to God. You're like, I've been talking to God. Like, I'm talking to Jesus right now. And I'm like, okay, all right. And then I remember Lo gave you a little pep talk.
I come back in the house. He
excited about the pep talk.
He's agreeing with Chanel. And then he's like, babe, you're not here. Like, you know, you just, I don't remember what he said. I was just mad because he gave me a scripture too. I was like, why is this man giving me scriptures right now? Like, I don't want to hear another scripture. I've been, at this point, like, the water's broken for like 48 hours, beyond 48 hours, actually. I'm scared. I'm tired. I'm just like exhausted. So I should have taken some rest. And then now he's giving me a scripture. I'm like, a scripture? I don't want to hear this. I did need the scripture though. So I think after that, it still got me like, okay, if he's saying it, then I really got to find my place with God. So I went to the bath, I went back to the shower, and in the shower, I just remember myself just envisioning myself in a field and like just being there with God. And I remember I was just like, you were like, God is going to speak to you. And so I really expected God to have like this long conversation with me and to like say all this stuff. And all I heard was just like, trust me, and like literally just surrender and like, trust me here. And so I decided in that moment, I was like, you know what? Like, I am going to trust you. And I just bursted into tears. And like, in that moment, I felt myself just release the hold that I had on myself. And I was like, you know, I can't do anything. Like, there's nothing that I can do here. There's nothing I can do in this moment. I can't control it. I can't do nothing. Okay, Lord, you're going to have to take over. And so I remember in that surrender, I just kicked into active labor. I came out the shower. I talked to Chanel. I told her about what I had experienced. I told her, like, my whole life I've just been fighting, and I've just been trying to control things, and I've been trying to keep my hands on things, you know, and play God in my life because I was scared. And out of fear, I've just been trying to control everything. And so I think immediately after that, I ended up in active labor. And then next thing I know, I see Amy, and then the team's here, and I'm just like back to back contraction, 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 contraction. And like they're really intense. And I'm just like giving it to God, you know, and I'm practicing my breathing. And so when they got really intense, because I think anytime someone told me they felt like I was going to have the baby in 2 hours, I think that's what would set me back too. Because if I didn't, then I'm like, wait, what? And so someone said that to me. They were like, I think in the next 2 hours, we'll see a baby. And then all of a sudden my boys woke up. And then I was like, oh my gosh, so how are they going to get to school? Is the lady here to take them to school? What's going to happen to them? So then now I reverted back to like not trusting God and trying to keep my hands on the situation. So then I'm like, can someone tell me if they made it to school? It's like my whole fight or flight goes back on, and then labor stalls. So like, y'all, if you don't think that fight or flight is a real thing, let me be the first to say it's a real place. So then we start, you know, trying to get me back to the right place. Honestly, like, I really feel like if I didn't have a team there, and I didn't have like people that knew what my goal was beyond like, just beyond what I was feeling in that moment, I would have definitely said, babe, let's get to the hospital, because this is just, you know. So honestly, just they helped a lot with my emotional well-being, and also like mentally, I already kind of knew that this was going to happen. I already knew like, okay, once you get to the point where you're about to have the baby, like you're still going to struggle mentally, because it's going to be the deepest level of like intensity that you ever felt. So I remember being in the pool. They finally got the pool up. I'm in the pool, and I'm just like relaxed. And I'm thinking, because y'all, I have watched so many videos by this time. So I watched like an Instagram video of this girl, and all she did was just sat there and just breathe the baby out. Okay. So I'm like, oh, this baby's coming out right here. Yep. All right. The baby's coming. And everybody's just relaxed on their phone. I'm like, okay, so he's not coming right now. That's what that means. And so I'm not ready to push. And so I remember just obviously still trying to have control. So then Chanel directed my husband to have another pep talk with me. And so Lo was really, really vital in getting me to the right frame of mind. So anytime I was overwhelmed, they would give us time for it to just be us two. He was kissing me. He was helping with like oxytocin and stuff like that. And so he had said something, and I think after that, and then Brittany ended up coming in there. But that was after, actually, I said I wanted to go to the hospital. Right when I said I wanted to go to the hospital was after we had done like all types of stretches, squats, this, that, to get the baby really low. And at that point, I was like, I'm really done now. And so then they gave me and Lo a moment. And then Brittany came in and told me like how I could push, because I'm guessing that at that time, everybody knew that I was ready to push, because, you know, when you're ready to push, I guess that's the time where you're begging to go to the hospital, or you really feel like it's time to quit. So I remember like she gave me a way to push, but I also coupled that with breathing the baby out. But I feel like just having that idea that I could push, I was like, oh, now I can do something. Okay. So I remember pushing, and then finally feeling the baby dropping down. And then right when the baby crowned, I breathed, and I didn't push. So I had no tearing. Thanks to Chanel, you were guiding me through that. No tears. And then I just remember having my baby. Well, Lo caught the baby, and then I had the baby in my hand, and I was just like, I did it. And like, that was like the most just joy and feeling of just like accomplishment that I had ever felt in my life. And ever since then, I've literally been transformed, because this is like, it's just a whole new life. Like, I could cry now, but just to have overcome, I guess, like all of those feelings of fear and like wanting to control life, and like truly trusting God and understanding too, like now I see, you know, and I'm probably going farther than you want me to go, but I just gotta say this. Like, no, I realized
go there.
What
go
trusting
there.
God means. I feel like we always think that like trusting God is like one moment in our life where we're like, I trust you, God, but it's a continual decision every single moment, every single day. And so for me, I made one moment of like, I trust you, God. And I thought, okay, well, the baby's here now. And it's like, no, some other fear is going to come up. Something else is going to come up. So honestly, the birth really transformed me in my understanding of God, and my understanding of faith, and my understanding of like what life really should look like. And I made a decision that I'm not going to run from pain anymore. I'm not going to try to avoid it. I'm not trying to numb it. Like, I want to live in it. I want to sit in it. I want to do hard things. And yeah, so I remember, yeah, I had the baby, and it transformed me. Okay.
That's so deep, y'all. And I wish that like as you were explaining it, like every picture of like what was happening is just in my mind. And I want to encourage like y'all to really take in what Wanda is saying. Cause like and it was interesting because when she went to the shower the second time, I was like, hey, I need you to go spend some time alone with God. She's like, I need one of y'all in the bathroom with me. I'm like, no, no, no. We're going to stand right outside the door. You need some alone time because you haven't really been able to be uninterrupted with God this entire time. Somebody's been next to you. You've been like half in. It was like a step in, like, God, come on now.
Yeah.
Lo, Chanel, come on now. It was like, it was like, there was, and yes, we are a team, right? But also like from having this exact experience. And that was what I was talking to Lo about when you were in the shower. We were just sitting there making sure you were okay. Like you were in there, it was quiet, and then like weeping, like pure weeping. And I was like, I said it happened. I looked at Lo and I was like, it's happening. Like this is the breakthrough. And that's exactly what happened to me in my first VBAC, which was like, God didn't even say that much to me either. It was like, hey, like, I got you. I'll take over now. And that moment when you fully surrender, like, yes, there's levels of control that you can have in your birth, right? You have control over how you prepare, you have control over how you respond, you have control over a lot of things. But like that true surrender is unlike anything you'll ever experience. And when you just started to cry out and you got out and you just looked lighter, you just looked freer. And I was like, Lo, this is it. Things are going to shift from here. And they did. And it makes me so proud because when people talk about birth and they talk about God and their birth, like it's not like a cute, let me read some scriptures, affirmations. Like those are a part of it, but those are just like the things that make that experience like you just experienced there. And sometimes, and like not to be, super like preachy or anything, but for some of us, Wanda and myself at least, God has to take you to like your lowest point for you to realize that you actually need him. And for a lot of us, like birth is the moment where we're like, okay, I can't do anything else by myself. I can't do this by myself. And I couldn't do it either. And in my third birth, it happened faster because I surrendered faster, right? Like I was like with him from the beginning. And my first birth, my second birth, it took me a while to get there. And I feel like if you were to ever have another baby, like it wouldn't even take you that much to get there because you already have like, all right, God, I hear you now.
Right.
You got me. I got you. We're good. Let's move on now. So it was like when you came out, like it was like you explained, but just from the other side of the story, it was just like you were lighter, you were freer. This like newfound confidence and strength came back, energy came back, and it was almost like, okay, like this is the story is now beginning. Not with the birth, but like with Wanda, like you had rebirthed yourself in that shower. You came out and you were like talking about your whole life. You weren't even talking about contractions. You were talking about like, I've been trying to control everything my whole life. Like I have to take it off. I can't live like this anymore. And I was like, oh my God, Wanda 2.0 is here. Let's do this. And it was just so beautiful to watch. And for those of you who are like wanting to have a supernatural birth, like I don't want you to expect it to be this easy, like experience. Like it's going to be hard.
I want to say that
mentally
too,
and emotionally.
A lot of times,
really hard.
I'm like so emotional now.
Yeah.
But a lot of times people, like for me, I'm people, okay? I felt like, okay, when people say supernatural birth, I mean, I read a book called Supernatural Birth and it was like, no pain, you're not going to experience pain, you're not going to experience all these things. And so I think for me, I just didn't expect it to be hard. And then, you have these birth videos and they don't really show the hard part. So that's why when I, like, literally when I got done giving birth, I told Carmen, who was taking my videos, I was like, leave these parts in there, because I really want people to understand, like, supernatural doesn't mean easy. Supernatural does not mean pain-free. The walk that we have, like, in this life does not mean that we're not going to experience pain or suffering or hard things. Like, that's my story, at least. Some people do have that story where they don't experience pain and all that stuff. But for me, I needed that. And I needed to know that, like, God is even in the pain, and God's hand is even in the pain. And, like, the story that God is writing for me is going to come with pain, and that's okay. And honestly, like, that's really what transformed me. And I feel like I'm happy that I was able to make that decision and lean into it and not try to run from it anymore, because I wanted to run from every contraction. But knowing that I had people in the room also that had gone through the same thing, like most everybody in there had already done their own births naturally. And then also, like, understanding that, like, God had my back, and that, you know, I could lean into him. And then, like, worst case scenario, if something biologically wasn't right, okay, they're going to take me to the hospital. But right now, you know, it was just like, I think understanding, like, supernatural birth story doesn't mean without pain. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have pressure. Because if I would have thought that, then I would have ran and been like, you know what, I really would have went through at the hospital. Because when I asked to go to the hospital, they wanted to see how serious I was. They knew I wasn't. They're like, do you really want to go to the hospital? Because if you really want to go to the hospital, we'll take you to the hospital. And I was like, no, I just want this baby out of me. And it's just acknowledging that with your birth, it is going to be painful, but there are comfort measures, and there are things mentally that you can do to prepare so that you can, like, go through it, you know? And honestly, I don't, like, if I did, and I'm not doing IVF, anybody that knows me, I'm not doing that again. But if I did have another baby just randomly, I don't even know if it would be that painful, because I wouldn't be fighting it, like, you know, but I was fighting tooth and nail because I was just so scared, you know? So.
Do you feel like you would have had this, like, transforming experience if you did, like, let's say you did have the baby in 2 hours, like, was, like, you know, predicted, like, oh, I'll be back in 2 hours, like, I'm pretty sure we're gonna have a baby by then. Do you
No,
feel like you would be
I
able
mean,
to share the
I
same
feel
kind of
like there's
story
really no
had you had a baby in
testimony
two
in
hours?
ease. Like, well, I was like, oh, I'm living the soft life this, soft life me. It's like, y'all, like, I don't want a soft life, because soft lives don't transform me, you know? Like, the things that are the easiest, I never really learned from, you know? Now it's like, because I've experienced having to trust God, having to surrender, having to, like, fall into the unknown, I'm like, oh wow, like, I don't have to know everything, I don't have to control everything. Like, I may not know what tomorrow's, and I'm battling that still every day, but at the end of the day, it's like, through that birth, I've unlocked the piece that, like, again, I said I was missing, you know? Like, we don't understand why God does what he does, we don't understand how he does, but I really did feel like, even through every contraction, like, it became so much more personal to me, because it was like, I'm actually finally, like, surrendering, and I'm doing things that I've wanted to do that I felt like I couldn't do. And I remember, like, while I was doing a contraction, the guy who did my body work, he knew that I had, like, a lot of childhood trauma. And so he was like, through this, not only can you birth out this baby, but spiritually you can birth through other things, you know? Like, you can birth out your trauma, you know? So I remember one contraction, like, whoop, there goes my mom. Whoop, there goes my dad. And I told them, because they don't, and at that time, they don't know nothing about me, really. I don't think y'all really knew, like, you know, that much outside. I wasn't just coming in here sharing my life's trauma, but, like, the most powerful contractions. And honestly, after that birth, I haven't had any sort of, like, hatred or bitterness towards my parents anymore. So, like, I do think, like, and this is really deep, I get it. If you're, like, a service person, this is sounding real crazy to you, and I get it, and I'm here for it. But, like, I feel like birth, and the reason when it changes women, when it does, is because you understand that, you know, like, it's not just natural. There's a lot of things mentally, spiritually, emotionally that's happening that can be rebirthed through your births. And that was even with my traumatic birth with Casey and Kylo. That still transformed me. But this just, like, transformed me on a whole nother level, because it was like I had to trust God 10 times more. And, like, he answered my prayer. He did it. Like, So that's a supernatural piece of it. And it was painful. I mean, it was
Yeah.
pressure, but I'll do it all over again if I could.
I would do it all over again with you if I could. So as we kind of wrap up, what advice or words of encouragement would you give to the mamas watching right now as they prepare to have the birth, that whatever their birth plan looks like, that they would be able to get close to that or accomplish that?
I would say, ask the question. I was like trying to read the comments at the same time.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I would just say,
what words of
lean
encouragement or advice to
into
moms who are
to
expecting?
trusting God or trusting whatever higher power it is that you rely on. And just trust that everything, like that you were created for this, that you can do it. And if you're struggling, like, don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to look for support in your area. Like Chanel mentioned at the beginning, if you feel like you can't afford it, do ask people, just like we do for everything else. Put it on a registry and say, hey, can you pour into this for me? Like, can you support me here? Invest in yourself, invest in the birth that you want. It's possible. If you're thinking that you're just going to do it and you're just going to be able to just like randomly know what to do in this, because people have been doing it for centuries, just dispel that lie now. You need help, you need support. Tap into knowledge, educate yourself, and then at the end of the day, like, do as much as you can, and then just give the rest over to God. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you for sharing your story. And thank y'all for being here. And I hope that you were inspired, encouraged through her story. I literally still like have chills like going through my spine right now, because I'm like, man, like I just saw so much power
18 hours
in that whole journey. And I was with you for like, let's also be really transparent for a second. I was there for like, I got to your house I got to you at Kikino at 3 p.m. And then I didn't leave your house until the next day to go get my kids from school. I think I left around like 1 or 2 p.m. to go get my kids from school. And I was like, this had to happen for that amount of time, you know? Like, I also want you guys to take away from this, just like Wanda said, like, sometimes it's long and it's hard.
No. Do you
fast
remember,
births are not always the goal for everybody.
I cried.
So
I mean, I feel like too, let me just say that, like, when you're interviewing people, don't just go with the first doula that you like see online or the first midwife. Like, make sure that there's a connection, because I really felt like when I just talked to Chanel, I was like, I know that like she's like, this is going to be an amazing connection. And I just felt like God in that. And I don't like, she was very professional. She wasn't like laughing at my jokes. Like, we weren't cool while she was like my doula. She, you know, and so I didn't know how it was going to be. But I feel like when the birth came to be, like the feeling that I felt on the phone with her, that she would be there to support me, to love me, to pour, you know, to like lift me up and all those things, like through like the hardest thing in my life, was facts. And I literally have pictures of Chanel, like she was there hours, almost 18 hours, probably 24 hours at this point, just like rubbing my back, walking me around, doing marches. Like, I was literally looking at my videos like, why was I naked this whole time? And this lady was right there the whole time. She did not care. And so I like, when you're interviewing people to work with, I don't care who it is, just make sure that you guys connect and that you guys like, you do feel something, you know. And if you have to ask God and be like, yo, like, should I work with this person? And if not, you know, I've had my friends that have had bad doula experiences too. So all of it all together, for me, the success was relying on God, trusting him every step of the way, looking for those key things that made me feel safe. When you talked, I felt safe. When Amy talked, I felt safe. My pelvic floor therapist, I felt safe. Like, all of these different areas, like, were confirmation that when I could get vulnerable, and when I got vulnerable, that you guys could be trusted as well. So, yeah.
I love this. Thank you, Wanda. Thank you for sharing your story with the world. Thank you for sharing your testimony with the world. And thank y'all for being here. And just know that you can also have this transformation. Trust God, trust yourself, trust your baby, trust your body, and you will have a positive experience. Not saying it will be easy, like we said, but it will be worth it. This is, yes, going to be recorded, and it'll be saved like in the next couple of minutes, so y'all can rewatch this. I would encourage you to rewatch it as you're preparing for birth, because sometimes it's a matter of like hearing the women's transformation rather than watching the story, because all of that is edited and all of that is like cut, and there's not always the difficult part. So I do want you guys to keep that in mind. And with that, y'all remember the course closes tomorrow. If you are interested in enrolling in the same exact education that Wanda went through, it's in there. There's nothing left unturned, making sure that you are all prepared mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. So that is there for your resource if that's something that you desire to have, that level of support and education. And of course, y'all just continue to be encouraged, follow Wanda, and watch her journey now, like as a mama of 3, because she's killing it in that game too. So let's not underestimate all of that. But anyways, y'all have a phenomenal rest of your Thursday. I don't even know what day it is anymore. Thursday. And I will see you on the next birth story, probably sometime in the next week or 2.
Bye.
So